Hi, you're listening to Everyday Superpower, a place where you can learn how to read an individual, read their minds in the purest way possible, and that's through their body language and the nonverbal communication they exhibit on their day to day. Here we're going to lay it down nice and simple how you can read someone purely by their behaviours and gestures, and by the end of this video you'll have learnt something you'll be able to apply in the real world from the get-go. This information won't leave you, and without further ado, let's get into it. So feel free to click like, click subscribe, leave a comment, given that you want to, and let's get into it. So today we're going to be talking about angry groups of people and how things can escalate very quick in a crowd of individuals. This links to the last video. The last video we spoke about personal space and the varying degrees of space an individual needs whilst communicating with people, and how close an individual gets, what it means and what it triggers within the brain of the individual. Okay, so when we speak about mobs of people and angry protest, and we relate it to personal space, what we need to consider is that people who have less personal space have more sway to being hostile. Why? Because when somebody, especially whom we don't know, is invading our personal space and territory, it triggers a nervous reaction within the brain. A reaction of fear and control, as that's our territory and we don't need people stepping within what is ours. It's very primitive, but it's our biological hardwiring, okay? So as a density of crowd will increase, it will start to reduce the personal space each individual has, provoking a fearful and angry response within the subconscious of the mind. So as the size and the scale of the mob, we talk about gang mentality and stuff, and how groups of individuals follow the same emotional context. As the personal space reduces between each member in the mob, in the gang, the overall tension and subconscious mind is going to become angrier. Okay? When the police fight against this mob and start taking people away for arrests and restrictions, the individual or individuals will calm down faster than whether they were within the mob, and the group as a whole will start to cool down as more and more are broken off and taken away. This applies to, political protests, it applies to hooligans, it applies to, general gang-esque activity where there's a high population of individuals together fighting or with the potential of aggressive attitude. This applies in cities where we see more crime in higher density populations. When we look at the projects in America, or what we call flats and council estates in the UK, high-rise buildings, high-rise council flats, where the poverty-stricken are placed together with limited space to show the, the worth of the individual, which isn't coming from my mind. It's the place where these governments tend to put the poverty-stricken. They restrict them, and in doing so, the individuals become more pent up, maybe not due to who they are as individuals, but due to the lack of resource and territory they're allowed to have. And in being bundled up with so many people who are stepping on the toes of this personal space and this intimate space, they become irate and angry. Okay? When we look at New York crime rates and when we look at London crime rates and we compare and contrast that per person to those whom live in less populated areas, we see a massive difference. This comes down to our need to own our territory and our own land. As a matter of self-respect and as a matter of biological hardwiring, for a man in particular, we need resource to ensure that we can provide more for our offspring. So it's a consistent and constant battle. And when we allow others to enter that personal space, we become irate. So the mob who is fighting for the same purpose is still actually triggering off of each other a negative headspace, because they are still strangers within a crowd coming way too close to us, and our brain needs to know who these people are to allow that to survive and to live. We need to survive, we're animals. When somebody gets taken in by the police and gets interrogated for something they may or may not know, they'll be seated and the officer will get very close to them to inquire. They don't need to inquire aggressively, but physiologically they come close. And what happens when they come close? It triggers this mechanism as to where the individual may act out emotionally, stressfully, nervously, off balance, off key, off center. And an emotional response in a human isn't the way to respond. It's devoid of logic and rationality. So it's very important consideration when it comes to personal space and why we see aggression from large crowds rather so than big showcases of positivity and smiles and happiness. It's a lot rarer. I hope you enjoyed. If you learned anything, click like, click subscribe, leave a comment. Thanks.